In this video, we're going to be setting up weapon pickups, and that's going to be networked. So when a player walks up to a weapon, presses E on it, it is going to go into their hands. So we're also going to be modifying our weapon class a little bit, so we can kind of set it up differently for when we go to have random spawns, similar to how we would eventually have our medkit, food, and water. We're going to kind of choose between them. So let's go ahead and jump into that. If we go over here to our survivalCharacter.h, our weapon variable here, this is going to be replicated with an OnRep event. So when that weapon becomes not a null pointer, for example, we're going to have it call a function to set up the weapon, which it's going to have to disable collisions and attach it to our socket in our hand. There's also one more thing we need to do, so I'll actually show you the reason why. So if we drag out this weapon right here and run over to it, oh, that's a little high, but you can see there's no collisions at all in it. So that means our line traces and stuff like that, they're not going to be able to hit it or come into contact with it. Let's lower that a bit. So in order to do that, we need to make our mesh component a U property, set it anywhere, and set it to compile. Okay, now let's open up the blueprint. Click on mesh component. We're going to type in collision, and under the collision preset, yours might be something else. Click custom, and then we're going to use query only. So if you read here, the first thing that it will recognize is raycasts, and that's pretty much what we actually care about. So now, nope, the weapon that's actually in my hand is having the collisions as well. So let's just comment out that line real quick that attaches it. Alright, so we run over to the weapon. You can see it's got collisions, as well as there. When I left click on it, you can see I'm hitting BP weapon base 5. So it's recognizing our line cast, our raycasts. So now we want to have a way to set up our OnRep event. So I'm just gonna, for now, I'm gonna move this, make a function to, that's gonna be our OnRep function. So make it a U function, void OnRep, weapon, weapon interacted. So that's gonna kind of dictate whether or not we picked it up or not. And for our weapon variable, it's gonna be a U property. It's going to replicated using, and it's going to be our OnRep function. Let's go ahead and create the definition and move it into an appropriate spot. So I'm thinking right below our server interaction, right here. So pretty much if weapon else, so here if the weapon's valid, we want to remove its collisions, that kind of thing. If it's not, we want to give it collision just like it had before. For now we're just going to be removing the collision because we don't really have any way to drop it, so we're going to add the rest when we implement that. So I'm just going to call it after, or give it a comment to say after drop. So now in the interact on the client, we're going to do a check. So else if, you can actually change these up, I think, so just where it's cast a storage, not storage, a weapon base from actor, then we call server underscore interact. We're going to do the same thing. So I'm going to change this up to where it's just the cast that dictates whether or not it's true or false, because we don't have any use for storing them in a variable. So copy this, go down to our server interact and paste it, but we want to assign it in here. So a weapon base, hit weapon, then we want to do weapon equals hit weapon, remove the server interact, and since this is now going to change from null to something valid, it should run this here. Now we also need to move what's in our begin play. Going to just copy all of this. Well, not the spawning, which is right there. Right, so yeah, literally just that. Remove everything else. Well, actually, let's comment it out, because we're probably going to revert back here shortly once we implement this. So back down to our OnRep function here. We're simply going to attach it to our hand socket, and we need to remove its collision. We're going to do that actually first. So weapon, set collision, or is it something else? Set actor, enable collision. I think, is that it? Yeah. We're going to set it to false. Alright, so it's disable the collision, attach it to our hand, we're good to go there. And that'll be set. We need to actually make it replicate. So in our do rep here, where we do like our open container, we're going to change that to weapon. And we only need it to, actually we do need it to replicate to everybody else. So we're going to remove the condition so other clients can see that we have a weapon in hand. Alrighty, let's give it a try. Right, walk up to the weapon, press E, and it attaches to the hands. There's still something there that's colliding, so we didn't fully remove the collision. I'm almost thinking we need to remove it from the actual... Let's just tinker around with it. So let's get the mesh and try it from there. Alright, so weapon, get. There. Should be something else for collision. I don't know why I'm not getting different options. I'm just going to go through the list real quick here. Nope, not saying anything. I can look through that later on. But pretty much we're going to have to figure out a way to... so I can probably see what that is in the viewer. Let's just go ahead and pick it up. F8. Where's the weapon? Alright, here's the weapon base. So it is picked up, but what in the world is still there? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Let's see if more than one client will have the same issue. Pick it up on client 1. Go to client 2. See the weapon's in his hand. Yeah, there's still collision there. Whoa. Yeah, because it should have removed it from everybody. So let's just make sure that it's not client only. Oh, right, because that's not going to run on a server. Wait, unless because of the collision being on the server, possibly. So we might need to manually call it to run on the server, too. So OnRep, weapon interacted, and let's build. So that might be the issue. Alright, let's go back to dedicated. Dedicated, pick it up. And we walk through it like nothing. Alright, so that was the issue. So while the collision was being disabled on the client, it was not being disabled on the server, because as a dedicated server, your OnRep events do not normally fire. If you want them to fire, you have to manually call them. So our weapon is now set up that way. Let's create a new function so we can actually make this public. We're going to call it setup. So this is going to be what we kind of sets up our weapon. So we're just going to pass in an F string, and that F string is going to dictate what weapon table we read from. So that way we can simply, once the actor is created, we can set everything after that. So void setup weapon. It's going to take in an F string. Just call it weapon name. Let's create a definition. What in the world? Alright, and here's where we move everything over. So everything in our begin play, we move to there and change this. Oh, it's an F name, not an F string. Derp. Do there. Update. There we go. And we can also make another variable here. So you property edit anywhere. It's gonna be F name. Just gonna call it. I'm just gonna call this default weapon name. So this can be default, and in the constructor, set that equal to nothing. And then we can do a check here. So if default weapon name is equal to, well, does not equal just an empty string, we can simply call setup weapon and pass in default weapon name. And I'll show you what that's going to do here in a second. And I'm also going to remake the blueprint class because that's still, for whatever reason, its mesh is still set. I don't think reloading it does anything. Nope. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. Go to our C++ classes, create a blueprint off of our weapon base. Weapon base 1. And move it into our weapons. Now let's get rid of the blueprint weapon base. Force delete it. And rename our new one to weapon base. And in our third person blueprint, let's just triple check. Alright, so we're set our weapon class back to default of the weapon base, even though we're not using it right now. Alright, so the weapon base, let's set the weapon data table, set it up there. remove anything from default weapon name. Oh, does it actually have to have something? Unless none's just a keyword. Yeah, we'll find out when we hit play. Alright, so yeah, none's just a keyword. So as you saw, nothing spawned on the weapon. So if I change this to AR-15, by default, as you can see, it spawns the AR mesh and loads from the weapon table there. If I do the val, spawns the val. Nope, and we need to re-enable collisions real quick. So click on the mesh component, collision, custom, and query only. Alrighty, so now we're good to go there. We got collisions, we can pick it up, now we have a val. It's probably going to be better to actually have it spawn something default. No. We're going to leave it. So now we have our weapon spawning of the specific type that we want it to do. When we spawn a weapon, so I'm going to re-enable our spawn actor. Just show you what I mean. So in begin play, remove our comments. Here's our, spawn actor. So I'm going to go ahead and build it and show you that it's literally going to be nothing. And then if we call our setup function and pass in the correct fname string, such as AR-15 or the ASVal, then it will spawn that corresponding weapon. Once this builds, though, that is public, right? Yep. Alright, so click play. And of course, for whatever reason, it spawned the ASVal. Yeah, that makes complete sense. Because that should be empty. Nope. Compile it back to none. Alright, so we have nothing. Nothing in hand. If I call weapon, setup weapon, and the fname being the AR-15, and compile, we should have an AR in hand. Yep, just like so. We have collisions though, which make it a pain. But yeah, it's pretty simple, and this will be very beneficial when we actually go to set up like random loot spawns and stuff like that. So that way all we have to do is, if we so happen to be picking that it's a weapon spawn, then we just call what weapon we want. We can choose a random element from an array of strings, which would be the list of weapons, and it'll read everything right out of our data table, and we don't have to touch anything, literally. If we want to add more weapons, we simply use the data table. And that's also going to dictate our animations and stuff like that too. So a quick reiteration on what we did in the let's start in weapon base. So we gave our weapons collision by setting up our mesh component to be editable from the editor instead of doing it manually in C++, just so we can choose what type of collisions we want it to have. Then we created a default weapon name as well as a function that takes in an fname. This is going to dictate how it gets pushed through. So if the default weapon name is equal to something other than just an empty string, we're going to call setup weapon and pass that in. So if we want it to be something by default, we'll go that route. So I'm actually going to change this real quick. Can you not add them? weapon string. Oh, what's the issue? Yeah, whatever. So this is going to be our default. So if we set it to default like the ASVal, then weapon name is going to be ASVal when it spawns. So that means it's going to load everything from, from this section of the data table. And as for picking up weapons, we have our weapon variable to be replicated via OnRep. So if it goes from null to not null, meaning we picked up a weapon, it's going to call our OnRep weapon interacted function. And if the weapon's valid, just do a double check. We're going to disable its collision and attach it to our hands. Just pretty much the same way we did everything else. And because it's having its collision disabled, we need to make sure we do that on the server as well. So because by default dedicated servers won't call, or the OnRep events won't fire, we manually call it. And that's literally it.